You cannot understand plant nutrition minus understanding what the cell is. So a lot of gardeners and farmers get to just see the numbers and the letters NPK on the bags of fertilizer. The weakest link of all of your nutrients is what actually determines the strongest strength that you get to have. So hello, Samson here. Welcome to this segment of book reviews. So if you've been following through, we did Jeff Lowenfels, Teaming with Microbes. That was the Organic Gardener's Guide to the Soil Food Web. Today's segment focuses on a companion book that is Teaming with Nutrients. This is the Organic Gardener's Guide to Optimizing Plant Nutrition. So a lot of gardeners and farmers get to just see the numbers and the letters NPK on the bags of fertilizer, minus having an understanding of what actually happens inside the plants when those nutrients go in there. And in this segment of book reviews, Jeff Lowenfels actually dives deep into explaining what happens when the nutrients are taken up. And there are 10 major lessons according to the 10 chapters of the book that I got, and I'm going to share with you. So diving right into it, the very first lesson is the plant cell is the stage where nutrition happens. When you go back to your grade 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 biology, you get to understand that a cell is a basic component of a living organism. So where everything else is built up to form a living organism, to form a plant, that is a basic structure that is there. So he gets into explaining that you cannot understand plant nutrition minus understanding what the cell is, because the nutrients do not just magically go or feed the plant. Instead, they're taken up by the cell across the cell membrane, the permeability of the cell membrane, which gets to happen in there. And then, they enter the organelles and then they participate in the building up of the cell, which forms a tissue, which then forms the organs, and then which gets to form the organism as a plant itself. So you definitely have to have a little biological understanding of how the soil works in order to understand how fertilizers get to work. The second lesson, still back to secondary school, where it's chemistry 101, talking about bonds, ions, and why they matter. So when we get to have an understanding of the different kinds of bonds which are there with nutrients, we understand that CHO, that is carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, form about 96% of what the whole plant is. And when we go into the section where we're going to be dealing with 17 essential nutrients for a plant to grow, we're going to go so deep into it. But the little understanding of the chemistry of how the formation and the bonds actually gets to work, we understand that, for example, nitrogen in the soil is taken up in two forms, that is in nitrate form and in ammonium form. So when you have an understanding of that little bit of chemistry, you get to understand what kind of fertilizer you need to put in the soil in order for your plants to grow. The third lesson stems from, this was one of my favorite subjects in university, actually, botany. So the botany for gardeners, we're dealing in stems, roots, and the leaves. These are the basic components actually that get to make up what a plant is like. In order to have an understanding of the food is coming from the leaves, going to all parts of the plant, inclusive of the roots, and then there is water taken up from the roots through the stem to like every part of the plant. Having that botanical understanding of your plants gets you to be positioned better to understand what you need to feed your plants. The fourth lesson is the 17 essential elements that a plant needs in order to thrive. So there are macro and micronutrients. This is like the general breakdown of them. The macronutrients, the normal NPK plus calcium plus magnesium plus sulfur. So these are needed in like very huge quantities. And then there are the rest of the nutrients like chlorine, molybdenum, copper, iron, zinc, and the like. These are needed in trace amounts, which is the reason why they're called trace elements, because they're not needed in like so huge amounts. And then when you get to understand von Liebig's law of the minimum, you get to understand that weakest link of all of your nutrients is what actually determines the strongest strength that you get to have. So whatever is going to be a limiting factor there is going to determine how good your plants are going to do. The fifth lesson that he brings out is that water is a delivery system. So how nutrients get to travel. What we need to understand is the fact that without water, nutrients don't get to move anywhere in the plant. Hence, there is need to have optimum levels of water. When you overwater your plants, you get to deplete them of oxygen, which causes anaerobic respiration in conditions, and the plant just cannot thrive and gets to die. So your health soil structure, thanks to the soil food web, is actually what is going to help hold water and the nutrients that the plant needs. Lesson number 6 is getting through the membrane. Concepts of passive and active transport get to matter here, and there are these concepts that we need to understand, that plants don't just absorb nutrients. Instead, they actively work together in order to get what they need. The cells in their work to get what they need. So there is active transport and passive transport. Concepts that have to do with diffusion and osmosis. There is the passivity of it and the activeness of it. So once you have an understanding of how that takes place, then you know what amounts of water and what amounts of nutrients to feed your plants. Lesson number 7, this is my favorite. We're talking about the molecules of life, what plants build with the nutrients. So there are 4 major types of molecules that plants get to build with the nutrients that are available. The first one is carbohydrates. These are the sugars, the monosaccharides, the saccharides, the polysaccharides. Then we've got proteins. Away from proteins, we've got lipids and the nucleic acids. So nucleic acids, this is where the DNA and the RNA are actually found. So the nutrients aren't just food, they are building blocks, remember? So it's a building block of a living organism, and without the carbohydrates, the proteins, because it's from the proteins and the nucleic acid that you get to build up from there. The carbohydrates, 96% of them are actually made up of CHO. So there is this whole connectedness that comes with the molecules of life. So what the nutrients get to build are the types of molecules which are needed for the plant to thrive. Welcome home. This is lesson number 8, where I think the biology and the chemistry just had the best of us. But the importance of soil testing, this is lesson number 8. The only way to know what is missing in your soil is actually to conduct a soil test. So when you get to just add fertilizer for the sake of adding, you do not understand and do not know what is missing in the soil, and you might just end up adding what is already in the soil minus having to get the understanding of what deficiencies the soil has. So the recommendation is get to test the soil between like 3 and 5 years. However, just do it like every 2 years. It saves you a lot of stress and gets you to understand what you need to add in the soil in order for your plants to thrive. Lesson number 9, the second last one, is the factors that get to affect the nutrient availability. So these factors stem from pH, from temperature, they stem from soil aeration, and the exchange of cation capacity, the CEC. So you can add all the fertilizers in the world that you want to add in your soil in order for your plants to grow, but with the wrong pH, with the wrong temperature, with the wrong soil aeration, with the wrong cation exchange capacity, you'll not be able to get any good results without those conditions actually being in a manner that are optimum for your plants to thrive. And lastly, number 10, my favorite lesson, is that natural fertilizers feed the soil, not the plant. When you get to feed the soil with the necessary organic composites which are needed in the soil in order to feed the plant, then you get to feed the plant, which then gets to feed the soil, and we form this whole loop of the soil feed web or food web. So the goal isn't necessarily to feed the plant directly like it is done with the chemical and synthetic fertilizers. The goal is to have your soil fed that it's able to give enough food to the plants, which then when they decompose, they get to feed back the soil, and then the whole loop continues. So practically this is teaming with nutrients. Till we meet in the next segment, I am checking out.